Hello, my name is Victoria Prevedello. I'm filling in for Manolo Barco, and today on MDC's Journalism Speaker Series, I'm joined here by Ammy Sanchez from WLRN. Welcome, Ammy.
Thank you so much for having me.
And so for the first question I wanted to ask you was, how did you know you wanted to get into journalism in the first place?
Well, I didn't know I wanted to get into journalism in the first place. I was always a very talkative person. In fact, I've told many people this, but my dad always said that when I died, I would need a coffin for my body and one for my tongue separately because that's how much I talk. And so I was always really communicative, and my parents say that from the young age of 3, I was already like translating between like Portuguese and Spanish and English. Well, not English, I didn't know English at the time, but like Spanish and Portuguese for my grandparents whenever they would come and visit us. And so there was always that side of me, but I never really thought that this thing that I enjoyed and loved so much and was so known for could be something that I would end up working in someday. And when I joined Miami-Dade College, I originally was studying business administration because I wanted to work in something related with like human resources. But then I joined the student newspaper, The Reporter, and I ended up falling in love with the interview process of like speaking with people and like getting to know their stories and being able to even share those stories. And I just felt so privileged to be able to have that kind of like access into people's lives. And I've always been like relatively like nosy and curious as well. So that's how I ended up getting my feet wet in that sense. But I didn't know that I was gonna do this professionally until I did an internship at WLRN in 2022.
Thank you. And so I understand that you were at The Reporter for like about 2 years. Can you tell me like what a normal day for you at The Reporter was like?
Sure. So, I mean, it varied because no day was the same. And that's pretty much what happens in news in general. But for the most part, I would be editing stories for the different sections of the newspaper. I would be making sure that all the other editors were also doing their jobs. I was also scheduling interviews, doing the interviews, preparing for said interviews, and then writing my own stories. So it kind of varied, but that was pretty much what the schedule looked like.
Yeah. And you were there like around like the tail end of like COVID. Like, did that impact your experience there at all?
I mean, when I joined The Reporter, because we were at the tail end of COVID, there weren't that many like students, or at least there weren't that many students that were coming in person. And so I guess in some way that was an impact. But what I really think I took away from the COVID experience is that I was able to report on things that had to do with COVID, and I was able to like get data and like learn how to like read it and analyze it and be able to put it together in a story in a format that other people could understand, how like there were this many people that were sick on campus and so forth. So I think in that sense, I was able to learn something from the COVID experience.
Yeah. Okay. And were there any, because I know you were an editor-in-chief at The Reporter, were there any like struggles or like hardships that like helped you get to that point, like you learned from them?
Struggles, hardships before I became editor-in-chief, I don't think so. I mean, when I first started writing, it was tough because most of my stories lacked a lot of detail. And like I would get the detail because I would ask the questions, but then I just wouldn't put it in the story because I just didn't really know how to like format stories. And I learned a lot about like organization in a story and like what should come first, what should come last. But I wouldn't really compare that to like the hardships that I experienced when I was editor-in-chief itself. And that's just because the job itself, as much as it was fulfilling and rewarding, it was also really tough because I was having to learn all these things that I wasn't really learning in like a class setting, because when I became the editor, I was at that point like a journalism student, but there weren't that many journalism classes. So I was really having to like learn on the spot. And I think that was the harder part of it all. And then also like having to like balance like my personal life with like my reporter life and my student life, and just like learn how to like put all of that together. But at the same time, it was difficult because since I didn't really have so much experience in the journalism industry, I didn't really know what kind of stories were the right stories to cover. My news judgment just wasn't as developed as it is today. And so I would cry often because I would be like, oh my gosh, like there aren't any stories, and like what am I gonna do? Like I'm not gonna have anything to write about, and then we're not gonna have anything for like the newsletter and for the paper itself when it prints out. And so I think those were the kind of like hardships that I encountered, but it was after I became editor more than anything, versus when I wasn't editor at that time.
All right, thank you so much. And was there ever a time you felt like demotivated, or like you felt like people weren't like appreciating or like taking you seriously? Like how did you get through that?
Well, in regards to like the people I was working with, or?
And just like in general, like in the larger space, like while you were working at the Reporter.
I mean, it's tough to be a student journalist, I think. I think you are taken a lot more seriously once you have a badge that says, hey, I'm with this newspaper or radio station or TV station that's like far more well known. But I think on that regard, it was a little difficult at times to get like people to speak with me. Because they thought it was for some kind of like, I'm assuming they thought it was for some kind of like school assignment, versus understanding that there were real deadlines that I had to fulfill. So I think in that sense, but that never really, I don't think, like unmotivated me from like continuing on, just because I was so determined to continue to share the stories of the people that I was speaking with. And I till today firmly believe in it, but I firmly believed in what I was doing then. And so I think that just kind of kept me going. And it was like, okay, if you won't speak to me, I'll find somebody that will, you know?
Yeah. Okay. And I understood that you won some awards. Could you like take me through those? Like what awards did you win? What was like the behind the scenes in making producing the stories that won those awards?
Yeah, so I never really wrote any stories thinking about like, oh, I'm gonna win an award someday. But I obviously always tried to do my very best. I tried to make sure that everything that I was writing was 100% true, and it was honest to whatever the situation that I was reporting about was. Mm-hmm. But I did win several awards during my time at the Reporter. Some of them included like feature story, sports writing, and also humor column writing. Yeah. And so the feature story one, it had to do with this like 11-year-old boy that was already like taking Joel Roman classes at the Kendall campus, and his name is Noah. And so it was really fun to interview him because he was so young but already so well spoken, and his older brother was 17 and he was already like studying for his like PhD. So it was really interesting to like see that kind of family dynamic. And so that was for the feature story. But then I remember for sports writing, it was about this Cuban basketball player that had been defected. And so it was really interesting to write about sports as well, because that's never been like my forte. But being able to learn about that was really cool. And for the humor column, I didn't even expect it, because so many people told me growing up that I wasn't funny, as a joke mostly to like bother me, but they would be like, oh my gosh, you're not funny, you're not funny. So winning an award about being humorous was humorous to me, and I started showing that to my family and friends whenever they were like, you're not funny. I'm like, well, I got an award that says I am, so I don't know. But it was an interesting experience to be able to write something, put it out into the world, and then be rewarded for it in some kind of way.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much. And we will be back with Ammy Sanchez in just one moment.
Hi, I'm Ammy Sanchez, the forum editor at The Reporter, Miami-Dade College's student newspaper. At The Reporter, I oversee a group of 15 students, ranging from column writers to illustrators. I assign and I edit columns, and I make sure that each column has its own illustration. As a news writer, I have to pitch story ideas and write. Before writing, I have to contact people to schedule interviews so that I may get all of the information that I need for the story. Once I've finished speaking with everyone I need, then I can finally sit down in front of my computer in a place that has peace and quiet. Then, since I already have an idea of the bigger picture, I will just start writing all of the information that I have down and later rearrange the structure so that it just makes sense. Once that is done, I'll work on the lead to make sure that it's something that catches people's attention and makes them want to read more. Although I still have one more year here at The Reporter, once I graduate, I will most likely continue doing something that relates to communications, because while I was at The Reporter, I realized that it's something that I'm extremely passionate about. And that's me, your forum editor, Amy Sanchez at The Reporter. Don't forget to follow us and check everything that we have on our website, Instagram, and Twitter at MDC The Reporter.
And we are back with Amy Sanchez from WLRN. And so, Amy, next I wanted to ask you was, because I understood you had an internship at WLRN before you began working there.
Yeah.
Did you intern there because you knew that's where you wanted to be, or did it just like happen?
So, one of the editors from WLRN had reached out to Manolo, like asking, like, hey, do you know of any students that might want to apply for our internship? And this was like just a few days before they were going to start their internships for that semester in general. And so Manolo immediately looked at me and he was like, you should apply. And I was like, why should I apply? Like, I've never done anything that has to do with radio or audio or sound or anything like that in general. And he was like, no, you should apply. Like, I think you'll do great. You should apply and it would help you grow and et cetera. And so I did. Immediately at that moment, I started working on my application and I sent in everything. They interviewed me a few days after that, and I'm so grateful that they gave me a spot for their internship program. And so I did that. Like, the internship was for about 3 months or so.
Yeah.
But I didn't immediately know that I was gonna, I wasn't necessarily planning on it for the longest time. It kind of happens, I guess, but I was very grateful that it did.
Yeah, okay, that's so wonderful. And I also wanted to ask, because I know that you had a program with NPR's Next Generation Radio. Mm-hmm. Can you take me a little bit through that? How did that come to be? Like, what did you do there?
Sure. So for NPR's Next Generation Radio, I did that in January of 2023. And how I came to find out that it existed was because one of, the health reporter at WLRN at that time, she was like one of the mentors for the program. And so she had come up to me when I was interning at WLRN and she was like, hey, there's this program, they're gonna be here the first week of January, I think you should apply. And if you do, she started to explain to me that I would essentially have to work on a story that represented what it means to be a Floridian. And so I was like, okay, cool. So I applied and I'm grateful that I also was able to do it. And so I did that the first week of January of 2023. And it was really cool because I was able to interview this owner of a French bakery in South Beach. And it was interesting too because she and her husband had found out that they were essentially going to have to move to another location because of a Miami Herald article that had come out, and it was saying that they were essentially going to be kicked out and so on and so forth. And so it was interesting to be able to hear her story. She's not originally from Florida, but also was kind of showing how Florida has different people from different places, and so it was kind of a different angle, but it was very exciting to be able to do that. And it ended up being a 4-minute non-narrated audio story. Mm-hmm. So you wouldn't hear my voice whatsoever in that story. It was literally just her telling her story, and that was also really cool to work on because I was able to learn how to put a story together without my voice in it, and how to edit it in such a way that obviously stays true to what the story is and who the person is, but at the same time that makes sense for the person listening to it. So it was a really good experience and I learned a lot.
Yeah, thank you. And regarding to that, I wanted to also ask you how, why was that the story you wanted to do? how did you find who you wanted to interview, like why you wanted to interview them?
So originally I wanted to interview somebody else, but unfortunately that person was not available for the dates that we needed to do the story for, like during. And so my mentor at that time, she knew of this French bakery owner, and she had gone to the bakery a few times, and so she suggested like, hey, maybe you want to look into this, and that's kind of how it ended up working out.
Okay, that's wonderful. And were there like any impactful like experiences, like anybody you spoke to that really like gave you a new perspective on something, or like helped like move you towards where you are now?
Like throughout the past 3 years, or when?
Throughout like the programs at like WLRN or like NPR, like.
I mean, I think it was kind of like a mix and just like a combo, like everybody put together. But I'll forever say, and I know it's gonna probably sound cringy to those listening, but I will forever be eternally grateful to Manolo, because he has pushed me so incredibly much, and to me it means the whole world, because I truly would not be where I am today had it not been for him believing in me, because I didn't see that in myself. And so I think out of all the people that have pushed me to grow, he has been the one that has pushed me the most. And that really has taught me a lot and keeps motivating me too, which is really cool.
Yeah. Well, that's wonderful to hear. What about the Hispanic journalists, like the the Hispanic Journalist Project?
The NHJ Latino Reporter.
Yes.
So that was a program that I was part of also in 2023, and it was really during the NHJ conference that was happening here in Miami, but we started working on one story a few months before, and it was an interesting thing because I got to, one, work in a story before the actual conference, but then throughout the conference, essentially, myself and the other students that were there for this program, we were covering different aspects and angles of the conference itself. So we had to, for one story, like find somebody at the conference that we found inspiring, and so, or that had some sort of like interesting story to tell. And so I spoke with the guy that was making the omelets, because he had said that, you know, people came from like all over the world to like try his omelets, and I thought that was so cool. And so it was interesting too, because for this project, we had to do like a little bit of everything. So I had, mostly because I wanted to work more in audio, I did like radio stories, but I also wrote like web stories. And then I also did like a little bit of like video editing. And then at the same time, like we were also like doing social media. And so I was like having to like focus on all of those different things, which has helped me so much now that I work at the radio station, because when I'm covering a story, I have to think about the photos that are going to be on the website, because I'm the one that has to take them. I have to think about what I'm going to write, obviously, in the web story, and I have to think about the audio that I'm getting. So like it's learning to like multitask, and I very much learned to do that at the Latino Reporter. And we worked on like 4 to 5 different stories. And so it was a really great experience, to be quite honest with you, because I also got to learn how to speak as a reporter, but in Spanish. And so that was very interesting as well.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you so much, and we will be back with Amy after a short break.
Miami's Freedom Tower is more than a landmark. It's a witness to a century of transformation. Marilyn Pumariega is the president of Miami-Dade College, the current owner of the tower. It first opened in 1925 as the headquarters for the Miami Daily News in Metropolis, a newspaper led by former Ohio Governor and Congressman James Middleton Cox. The newspaper moved out 3 decades later, leaving the tower without a clear purpose. That changed when the federal government stepped in, leased the building, and transformed it into a processing center for the 650,000 Cubans fleeing Fidel Castro's communist revolution between 1962 and 1974.
Once again, we are back with Amy Sanchez from WLRN. And so, Amy, like some of the last questions I wanted to ask you was, so what was the most like impactful story you've like written like during your time at WLRN?
I remember there was this one story that I worked on, and it was about the incoming CEO for the Dream.us. And one of the reasons why her story was so impactful to me is one, because it was an immigrant story, and I am myself an immigrant. Granted, I have not had the difficult immigrant story, and I am so grateful for that, but I know a lot of people that have. And specifically her, she had come from Ecuador when she was really young, and she was DACA, and so she had fought for the longest time to try to get more people in her, like in similar situations as hers, to be able to have opportunities to go to college and study. And so she used, in a sense, her privilege of her being able to come to Miami-Dade College and study here to be able to speak nationwide and advocate for that. And one of the things that she said that will forever stay with me is that after she became a U.S. citizen, she said that she thought to herself, like, I had been asking this country to marry me for the longest time, and now it finally said yes. And like when I think about that every single time, I don't know if it's because it sounds so poetic to me, but I think there's just something so true and so, I don't know, I guess in a sense also motivating about her story. And so I think I'll forever take that little piece of her story with me forever.
Yeah, I agree. That was like a beautiful quote. And so I wanted to also ask regarding WLRN, like, how have you grown? Like, how do you like feel like you've grown during that time? Like, what has helped you grow?
I have grown so incredibly much. So it's hard to just like pinpoint one thing, but my writing has definitely improved. It's also interesting because it's different to write for print than it is to write for radio, as I'm sure that it's probably different to write for TV, but learning how to write for radio for the person's ear is very, very, very challenging, but at the same time, incredibly rewarding, because you know that if you write in a simple, like, but not necessarily watered down, but in a simple way, people will be able to actually understand what it is that you're saying. And so I've been able to like learn a lot about that. And then also, I mean, more than anything, I've also been able to like grow when it comes to audio editing, and that has been a lot of fun. I love that. That's like one of my favorite parts about my job in general. But I've also gotten the privilege to be able to speak with different authors and people from the South Florida community and like politicians. And so I've grown in the way that I also ask questions and in the confidence that I have when asking the questions, because I struggle a lot with like being shy and more like to myself, especially when I'm like interviewing somebody. And so like learning to have a little bit more authority when conducting an interview. And so all of those things. But I think what has helped me the most grow is working the morning production shift with the morning anchor, Christine DiMattei, and I've told her that personally, but seeing her and her skills and her talent and her creativity and the way that she's able to write so fast, so clear, and so factual, it really inspires me and it motivates me. And when she's editing my stories in the morning that she's going to go live with, it has to be really fast because we don't have that much time to prepare. We literally have an hour to prepare for the morning show. And so it's a lot of really fast-paced editing, and it's really cool to be able to see her edit, because then I can kind of like get inside her brain and think like, okay, so I shouldn't say this, I shouldn't say that, or like there are certain words that you just can't say on radio, not because it's wrong, but because it can sound wrong. Like there was this one time, I didn't write it, but it was somebody else's story, but someone had written, they were talking about like ice, and so they had written ice with apostrophe S, and so it sounded like ISIS, which is a very different thing.
Yeah.
And so Chris then came and she told the team, and she was like, yeah, this is, we have to be very careful with like how we write things. And so it's those little things that to a person, when they're reading a story, they might not catch it, but when you're saying it out loud, you're like, okay, yeah, this is definitely not gonna sound great on radio. And so she has pushed me a lot, and I've grown a lot thanks to her as well. So I'm really grateful for her.
Thank you. And so also regarding to that, I know that sometimes you have to fill in as like on-camera talent.
Yeah, when Chris is not there, I fill in for her, but it's not on camera. What I do is that she's the morning anchor, so I fill in for her, but with my voice. Mm-hmm. So nobody sees me, but I am there. And so, yeah, when she's not there, I'm the anchor. But it's really cool to be able to do that too.
How does that differ from like, that like being the anchor, like versus like producing, like doing all the research stuff like behind the scenes? Like, how does that differ?
Well, it's a very different job, and the reason why is because, at least for the morning production team, it's a team of 2 people. It's Chris and I. And so when she's not there, obviously someone else will fill in for what would be my position, but I have to wear like different hats that she wears all the time, which is essentially like the anchor hat, the reporter hat, and also the editor hat. Reason why is because obviously she's going live on air, she's speaking, so she has to prepare every single newscast, which is what we call them, that every time that she goes on air, we call it a newscast. And so she has to prepare every single newscast with the stories that she's going to be reading on air, but then at the same time, she also needs to write stories, because sometimes we need more. And so she also has to write stories, and she obviously needs to make sure that what she's writing makes sense and is factual. And so she needs to be like researching, so doing the same job that I am. And then at the same time, she needs to edit my stories because she's my editor in the morning. And so when she's not there, I have to do all of those 3 things. And so specifically when I first started to fill in for her, it was very nerve-wracking. Still is, but it was much more nerve-wracking then than it is now, because I didn't feel as comfortable editing other people, like other work from like my peers and stuff. And so I was like having to like learn to like manage all those different things. But yeah, that's how it differs. Like she has to wear like 3 different hats, and mine is a little more simple in that sense.
All right, well, thank you so much. It was so interesting to hear about how Amy lived like day to day as like working at WLRN. It was so interesting to learn about like what she did beforehand, her backstory sort of. And I would like to thank you all for watching, and thank you so much, Amy Sanchez, for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course, thank you so much.